Picture a busy street in a city you know well. Every shop is selling almost the same thing. One cafe offers coffee for $3, the one next door sells it for $2.95, and another tries to win customers by adding a free cookie. The owners are constantly watching each other, copying ideas, and lowering prices just to keep people walking through the door. That is the red ocean. It is crowded, noisy, and exhausting. Everyone is fighting over the same customers, and the only way to win is to take business away from someone else. Now imagine walking a few blocks further and discovering a tiny place you have never seen before. Instead of just selling coffee, they offer a full experience: freshly roasted beans from small farms, a cozy reading corner, live acoustic music on weekends, and a barista who knows your name after your first visit. They are not competing on price. They have created something so different that they are attracting people who were not even looking for a cafe that day. That is the blue ocean, a market space so fresh and unique that competition does not matter. This is the core idea behind Blue Ocean Strategy by W. Chan Kim and Renee Mauborgne. The authors studied over 150 business moves across 30 industries, spanning more than a century. And they found something surprising. The biggest success stories did not come from beating the competition. They came from companies that made the competition irrelevant by creating new markets. Think about Cirque du Soleil. Traditional circuses were dying: high costs, shrinking audiences, and pressure from animal rights groups. Most circuses tried to survive by cutting ticket prices or adding another act with more animals. Cirque du Soleil went in the opposite direction. They removed the animals entirely, added live music, stunning costumes, and theatrical storytelling. It was no longer just a circus, it was an art performance for adults and families alike. They created an entirely new audience and charged premium prices. Or look at Nintendo in 2006. At that time, Sony's PlayStation and Microsoft's Xbox were battling in a red ocean over hardcore gamers. Better graphics, faster processors, bigger games. It was an arms race. Nintendo chose not to fight that battle. Instead, they created the Wii, a console with simple motion controls that anyone could use: children, parents, even grandparents. They opened up gaming to people who had never played before. That was their blue ocean. And here is one more you might remember from your own life: Netflix. In the early days, video rental stores like Blockbuster ruled the market. Everyone was fighting over late fees, promotions, and physical DVD stock. Netflix ignored that fight and built a subscription model with no late fees, then moved into streaming movies directly to your home. Suddenly, they were not just competing with Blockbuster. They were operating in a market space Blockbuster did not even understand yet. Blue oceans are not about making small improvements. They are about changing the game entirely. They are about finding people who are not yet your customers and giving them something so different, so valuable, that they cannot help but pay attention. In this book, you will hear stories from all over the world, from airlines to retail, from technology to entertainment, showing how companies have stepped out of the bloody red waters of competition into the calm, open blue oceans of new opportunity. You will see how to find these open waters for yourself, how to design your strategy, and how to sail forward without looking back. So imagine again that busy street with the noisy cafes, all selling the same thing. Then picture yourself walking further, turning a corner, and finding something entirely unexpected, something that makes you stop, smile, and think, I have never seen this before. That moment is the magic of a blue ocean. And that is where we are going next. When most of us think about business strategy, we think about competition. We picture companies watching each other closely, trying to match prices, launch new features, and out-advertise their rivals. It is like running a race on a track where everyone is sprinting side by side. The problem is, in that kind of race, there is only one winner, and everyone else is left behind, tired and frustrated. This is the reality of the red ocean. It is bloody because the fight for market share is fierce, and the waters are crowded with competitors. You can see it almost anywhere. Look at the airline industry. Major carriers often fight each other on ticket prices. One airline lowers fares, and within hours, the others match it. They all offer similar seats, similar flight times, and even similar snacks. Customers choose based on price or small differences, and the airline's profits get squeezed thinner and thinner. This is classic red ocean behavior, fighting over the same group of customers, offering almost the same thing. But there is another way to play the game. Imagine an airline that asks, what if we did not just compete on price and schedules? What if we completely changed the experience? That is exactly what Southwest Airlines did in the United States. Instead of copying other airlines, they removed expensive extras like meals and first-class seating, focused on short-haul flights, and made boarding quick and simple. They kept their planes in the air more often than their competitors, cutting costs and improving turnaround times. At the same time, they made flying feel fun and friendly with a casual atmosphere. Suddenly, they were not competing head-to-head with traditional airlines. They had created a new market space: affordable, no-frills air travel that appealed not just to regular flyers but also to people who would have driven or taken a bus. That was a blue ocean. The first step in finding your blue ocean is to change the way you see the market. Most companies accept the boundaries of their industry as fixed. They look at what everyone else is doing and think, we have to be better than that. But blue ocean thinkers ask, what if we did something entirely different? They stop looking at their competitors and start looking at customers, and even more importantly, at non-customers. Take the case of Yellowtail wine. For years, the wine industry was a classic red ocean. Wineries battled over subtle flavors, vineyard prestige, and expert ratings. Most marketing was aimed at wine drinkers who already cared deeply about wine. Then came Yellowtail, an Australian brand that decided to target people who did not usually drink wine. They simplified their flavors to make them easy to enjoy, gave the bottles bright, friendly labels, and priced them affordably. They made wine fun and approachable rather than sophisticated and intimidating. In doing so, they reached a huge audience of beer and cocktail drinkers who had never been part of the wine market before. Another example is Apple's iTunes Store in the early 2000s. Music companies were locked in a battle against illegal downloads and declining CD sales. Apple did not join that fight directly. Instead, it offered a legal, easy-to-use platform where people could buy individual songs for a small price and play them on their iPods. They did not just compete with record stores, they created a whole new way for people to enjoy music legally and conveniently. What these stories show is that blue ocean strategy begins when you stop following the rules everyone else follows. In a red ocean, companies focus on beating their rivals. In a blue ocean, you focus on making your rivals irrelevant. This shift requires asking different questions. Instead of how do we offer more than the competition, you ask what can we remove, simplify, or combine to create something entirely new. Of course, creating a blue ocean does not mean you ignore value or quality. The authors call the key principle value innovation, offering something that delivers more value to customers while reducing your costs. That is what Southwest, Yellowtail, and Apple all did. They gave customers something new and exciting, but they also cut costs in areas customers did not care about. When you find your blue ocean, growth comes not from stealing customers but from creating them. Non-customers, people who are not buying in your industry at all, become your greatest opportunity. Think about Nintendo's Wii again. Before it launched, many people had never played video games or felt excluded by complicated controls. By creating simple, motion-based gameplay, Nintendo turned parents, grandparents, and even family gatherings into gamers. Their sales exploded because they were not fighting for the same teenage audience as Sony and Microsoft. They had created a market of their own. Blue oceans do not last forever. Competitors will eventually notice and try to follow you. But the advantage is that by the time they arrive, you are already far ahead, with loyal customers and a strong brand identity. The challenge is to keep innovating and finding the next blue ocean before your current one turns red. So as you think about your own business or career, ask yourself, are you competing in a red ocean, fighting over a limited pool of opportunities? Or could you be sailing into a blue ocean, creating demand where none existed before? The answer could change everything. Once you start to see the difference between red oceans and blue oceans, the question becomes, how do you actually create one? It is easy to admire companies like Cirque du Soleil, Yellowtail, or Apple after the fact. But when you are standing at the beginning, how do you find that untapped market space? The first step is learning to spot opportunities where others see none. Many companies fail to do this because they are looking too closely at their competitors instead of looking outward. They are trapped in what the authors call competitive benchmarking, copying features, matching prices, and trying to beat rivals at their own game. The problem with this approach is simple: the more you focus on beating the competition, the more you end up looking like them. Let me tell you about a company that understood this early: Curves, the women's only fitness franchise. Before Curves, gyms were designed mostly for men or for serious athletes. They were often intimidating, filled with heavy equipment, mirrors, and personal trainers shouting instructions. Many women who wanted to get in shape felt uncomfortable in that environment. The founders of Curves saw this and decided to create a new space: small, friendly studios focused on 30-minute workouts, designed specifically for women who were not gym regulars. They removed all the intimidating aspects, kept the experience simple, and created a community-focused atmosphere. Within a decade, Curves had opened thousands of locations around the world. They did not just win customers from other gyms, they attracted people who had never set foot in a gym before. This is a key point in Blue Ocean's strategy to find new customers: you often need to remove things rather than add them. In Red Oceans, businesses pile on more features, more variety, and more complexity in an effort to be better. But Blue Ocean creators strip away what people do not value, making room for what really matters. Consider IKEA. Before IKEA, buying furniture was a complicated process. You went to a showroom, chose a style, waited weeks for delivery, and paid high prices for custom assembly. IKEA flipped the script. They removed the showroom salesperson, eliminated home delivery, and handed customers the responsibility to assemble their own furniture. In return, they offered modern design, flat-pack portability, and incredibly low prices. The trade-off was worth it for millions of people, especially young families and students. IKEA did not just compete with existing furniture stores, they created a whole new way to buy and enjoy furniture. One way the authors suggest finding your own Blue Ocean is to look at non-customers in 3 groups. Soon-to-be non-customers: people who are unhappy with the current market and are ready to leave. Refusing non-customers: people who have chosen not to use your industry's offerings at all. Unexplored non-customers: people who have never been targeted because they seem outside the market's reach. Think about Starbucks in its early days. Before it became a global brand, coffee in the United States was mostly a cheap, grab-and-go drink from diners or fast food chains. Many people who wanted a social place to relax and work outside the home or office did not think of coffee shops at all. Starbucks combined high-quality coffee with a third-place atmosphere somewhere between home and work. They reached people who were not actively seeking coffee but were looking for a welcoming space. This was not about selling a drink. It was about selling an experience, and it opened up a vast new customer base. Blue Oceans often emerge when you change the context in which people think about your product. Look at GoPro. Before GoPro, most people used regular cameras for vacations, events, and family photos. Extreme sports enthusiasts were underserved. They needed cameras that could handle water, snow, dirt, and impact. GoPro built compact, durable, mountable cameras that captured high-quality video in situations where traditional cameras would fail. Suddenly, they were not competing with Canon or Nikon, they were serving an entirely new audience of adventurers and athletes. What these examples have in common is a willingness to step outside the accepted rules of the industry. They did not start by asking, "How can we beat our competitors?" They started by asking, "Who is not being served, and why? What do they actually care about? What would make them take notice?" Of course, finding your Blue Ocean is only the beginning. Once you have identified a space with little or no competition, you need to design your offering so that it balances innovation with value. If you are too innovative without delivering value, you will confuse or alienate customers. If you deliver value without innovation, you will be easily copied. The sweet spot: value innovation is where your offering is so compelling that customers cannot ignore it, and so unique that competitors cannot easily replicate it. In the next part, we will explore how companies systematically create these Blue Oceans using tools and frameworks that help them rethink their market space. But remember this: the biggest leaps forward rarely come from fighting harder. They come from looking where no one else is looking and daring to sail away from the crowd. Once you decide to leave the red ocean behind, the next question is how to actually chart your course. The authors of Blue Ocean Strategy introduce a way of thinking that forces you to step out of the industry's accepted patterns. One of the most powerful tools is called the 4 Actions Framework, and while it sounds technical, it is really about asking 4 very human, very practical questions. What can we eliminate? What can we reduce? What can we raise? And what can we create? Let me show you how this works in the real world. Take Cirque du Soleil. In the 1980s, the traditional circus industry was in trouble. Animal rights issues, declining audiences, and the rise of home entertainment were pulling people away. Most circuses responded by trying to cut costs or put on bigger animal acts. Cirque du Soleil went in the opposite direction. They eliminated animals entirely, a radical move at the time. They also reduced the number of acts that were purely slapstick or aimed only at children. Then they raised the level of artistry, storytelling, and stage production, borrowing from theater, dance, and live music. Finally, they created something entirely new, a sophisticated, adult-oriented circus experience. The result was a market that had no real competition. They were not fighting Ringling Brothers, because they had built a stage in a whole new arena. Now, the beauty of the 4 actions framework is that it works for any industry. Think about Dyson vacuum cleaners. Before Dyson, most vacuums were ugly, clunky, and relied on disposable bags. Dyson eliminated the bag entirely, raised suction power and design appeal, reduced the frustration of clogging and maintenance, and created a transparent, high-tech look that made the vacuum cleaner feel like a piece of engineering genius. Suddenly, vacuum cleaners were not just household tools, they were status symbols in some homes. The key here is to break away from the idea that more is always better. In red oceans, companies keep adding features to outdo one another. But in blue oceans, you focus on removing what does not matter and doubling down on what customers truly value. Another tool the authors talk about is the strategy canvas. Imagine drawing a simple chart where the horizontal axis lists the key factors that customers in your industry currently compete on, things like price, speed, variety, quality, and the vertical axis shows the level of offering for each factor. When you plot your competitors, you usually see a similar pattern. The lines look almost the same, with small variations. That is the red ocean. Then you plot your own company, not based on copying others, but based on your 4 actions decisions. The goal is to create a completely different curve, one that shows where you are offering less, where you are offering more, and where you are creating something entirely new. Look at Nintendo with the Wii. If you drew a strategy canvas for video game consoles before the Wii, Sony and Microsoft would have been almost identical: expensive, high-powered machines with complex controllers, aimed at hardcore gamers. Nintendo's curve looked totally different. They reduced the technical specs, eliminated the complexity of controllers, raised the accessibility for all ages, and created a fun, motion-based way to play. That unique curve on the strategy canvas was their blue ocean. The point of these tools is not just to plan a product, but to shift your thinking from competition to creation. This is where many companies stumble. They might see the concept of a blue ocean as just a marketing trick or a one-time gimmick. But it is not about flashy launches, it is about designing your entire offering so it lives outside the fight for scraps. Of course, stepping into a blue ocean requires courage. Think about Netflix in its early days. Back when they started mailing DVDs, Blockbuster ruled the rental market. Netflix's idea to eliminate late fees, allow online ordering, and deliver DVDs directly to your door seemed risky. They reduced the hassle of going to a store, eliminated the penalty of keeping a movie too long, raised the choice of available titles, and eventually created streaming, a completely new way to watch. Blockbuster laughed at first, but by the time they tried to adapt, Netflix was far ahead. What is important to notice here is that each of these companies was not chasing competitors, they were chasing a vision of what customers could want if only someone gave it to them. They were not guessing in the dark either. They used structured thinking to decide what to cut, what to grow, and what to invent. If you are looking to apply this in your own life or business, you can start small. Picture the 4 actions grid and write down the things your competitors all do. Then challenge yourself. Which of these could I eliminate completely? Which could I make simpler or smaller without hurting the value? Which could I enhance or double down on? And finally, what could I offer that no one else is even thinking about? This is not just a corporate exercise. It can apply to careers too. Imagine you are a freelancer. All your competitors might be offering the same services, charging hourly, and sending standard reports. What if you eliminated hourly billing, reduced boring updates, raised personal consultation time, and created a completely unique, outcome-based guarantee? Suddenly, you are not fighting for the same clients, you are creating your own category of service. By the end of this process, the competition starts to feel less threatening. You are not trying to swim faster than them in the same pool, you have built your own pool. And that is the heart of the blue ocean mindset. Once you understand how to strip away what does not matter and create what no one else has thought of, the next challenge is to redefine the boundaries of your market. Most businesses operate inside invisible fences. They assume certain customers are not for them, certain price ranges are fixed, or certain industries are completely separate from their own. Blue ocean creators break these invisible fences. Think about Southwest Airlines. In the 1970s, air travel in the United States was either expensive and formal for business people, or it was avoided altogether by average families who relied on buses and cars. Southwest saw a possibility others ignored: what if they could make flying as simple, cheap, and casual as taking a bus? They cut away free meals, fancy lounges, and assigned seating. They reduced the turnaround time of planes so much that their aircraft spent more time in the air than on the ground. They raised fun and friendliness as part of the experience, with cabin crews telling jokes over the intercom. They created low, predictable fares that attracted millions of people who had never flown before. Southwest was not just stealing customers from other airlines, they were bringing in people from the highways. Another example is the Nintendo Wii, which we touched on before. Instead of chasing after the teenage and young adult hardcore gamer crowd like Sony and Microsoft, Nintendo looked at families, seniors, and casual gamers who found traditional controllers too complicated. They did not try to outdo the others on graphics or processing power. Instead, they made a motion-sensitive remote that even a grandparent could pick up and play. Whole families started gathering in living rooms for bowling matches, tennis games, and dance competitions. Nintendo had crossed into territory the rest of the industry had ignored. The authors describe this way of thinking as looking across 6 different paths to find blue oceans. One of those paths is looking across alternative industries. For example, when NetJets came along, they did not compete directly with airlines or private jet manufacturers. They noticed that wealthy executives and celebrities had 2 imperfect options: fly first class on a commercial airline with no flexibility, or buy their own private jet and take on massive costs. NetJets created fractional jet ownership. People could own a share of a jet and use it when they needed. It was cheaper than owning a whole plane but far more convenient than commercial flights. They blended the benefits of 2 industries and built a new one. Another path is to look across strategic groups within an industry. Mercedes and BMW focus on high-end luxury cars. Toyota and Ford focus on affordable, practical vehicles. Then came Lexus. Toyota realized there were customers who wanted the quality and status of a luxury car but without the extreme price tag of European brands. Lexus combined Toyota's efficiency with higher-end features and design. They were not just another car, they were an entirely new choice for a certain type of driver. A powerful way to break boundaries is to rethink the buyer. Sometimes the person who uses a product is not the same as the one who decides to buy it. Pharmaceutical companies know this well. Doctors prescribe, but patients use. The same principle can be applied in unexpected places. Consider children's toothbrushes. For years, companies designed them for kids' hands and tastes. Then Oral-B realized it was actually parents who made the purchase decision. They started advertising to parents about the health benefits and long-term advantages, not just the cartoon characters on the handle. Sales soared. One of my favorite examples comes from the wine industry. For decades, winemakers assumed their market was either wine lovers who appreciated complex flavors or people who bought wine for special occasions. Then came Yellowtail, an Australian brand. They targeted beer drinkers and casual socializers who found wine intimidating. They eliminated the jargon, reduced the range of options to just a few easy-to-choose varieties, raised the fun factor in their branding, and created a taste profile that was smooth and easy for beginners. Suddenly, people who never considered themselves wine drinkers were buying bottles of Yellowtail for backyard barbecues. The common thread here is that blue ocean creators do not just look at the current customers, they look at the people who are ignoring the industry entirely. They ask, why are they not buying? What would make them take notice? Sometimes the answer is to make something cheaper. Sometimes it is to make it simpler. And sometimes it is to make it more fun. But it always involves stepping outside the usual competitive race. Once you start seeing the world this way, it changes how you approach almost every challenge. You stop asking how can I beat them, and start asking where are they not looking. That is where the calm, wide, open waters are the blue oceans. Creating a blue ocean is not only about finding an untapped market. It is also about making sure people instantly understand the value of what you are offering. If your idea is complicated, hard to explain, or feels risky, even the best concept can fail. People move toward what feels clear, simple, and exciting. Think about Apple's iPod launch in 2001. Portable music players already existed, but most had clunky designs and technical descriptions like 64 MB of storage. That meant little to the average person. Apple changed the conversation entirely. They did not sell storage capacity. They sold the idea of 1,000 songs in your pocket. That single phrase told you what it did, why you would want it, and why it was better than anything else. It was immediate, simple, and powerful. The same principle applies to business models. Look at Airbnb. Before Airbnb, most travelers had two main choices: stay in a hotel or stay with someone they knew. The idea of staying in a stranger's home felt odd, maybe even unsafe. Airbnb made it clear and easy. They offered professional-looking photos, secure payment systems, and customer reviews. They positioned it as a way to belong anywhere, giving you a local, personal experience at a price that could beat hotels. The value was obvious, and adoption took off. In a red ocean, companies often pile on features, thinking that more will impress customers. But in a blue ocean, the goal is to strip away anything that clouds the core value. You focus on what makes your offering unique and irresistible. Take the case of The Body Shop. At a time when cosmetics advertising was filled with glamorous models and promises of impossible beauty, The Body Shop did something radical. They eliminated overblown claims and reduced fancy packaging. Instead, they raised transparency, honesty, and environmental responsibility. They created cruelty-free, ethically sourced products and made that their story. Customers immediately understood what The Body Shop stood for and why it was different. Sometimes, making an idea irresistible means reshaping the whole experience around it. Think about Starbucks. Coffee was everywhere, but Starbucks turned it into a lifestyle. They raised the quality, created a comfortable atmosphere, added personal touches like writing your name on the cup, and made their stores a third place between home and work. People were not just buying coffee, they were buying an experience, one they could explain in a single sentence: it is my place to relax. One of the most overlooked parts of this process is pricing. In a blue ocean, your price must feel fair and accessible to the customers you are targeting, while still supporting your business. If it feels overpriced, people hesitate. If it is too cheap, they doubt its quality. Netflix is a great example of getting it right. When they launched streaming, they charged a monthly subscription that was less than the cost of renting just 2 movies from Blockbuster. The deal was so clear and appealing that people signed up without much thought. Another critical factor is removing barriers to adoption. Imagine you have the best product in the world, but it requires customers to change too many habits at once. That is like asking someone to move to a new city without packing their bags. Tesla faced this problem in its early days. Electric cars were exciting, but people feared running out of battery power. Tesla addressed this by building a network of fast charging stations, showing customers they could travel long distances without worry. They did not just sell cars, they sold the reassurance that came with them. When you design your offering in a blue ocean, you are not just thinking about the product. You are thinking about the customer's entire journey, from the moment they hear about it to the moment they use it and share it with others. If every step feels easy, clear, and rewarding, you have created something that does not require heavy persuasion. People will want it instinctively. A good test is this: if you were standing in an elevator and someone asked what you do, could you explain your product in one sentence and make them curious enough to ask more? That is the clarity you want. Just like Apple with 1,000 songs in your pocket, or Southwest with the low-cost airline for everyone, or Yellowtail with the fun wine for people who do not drink wine. It is not about clever slogans. It is about a core idea so simple and so valuable that people instantly get it and remember it. When you have that, your blue ocean offering starts pulling customers in like a current. They are not comparing you to others because, in their minds, you are not like anyone else. That is the magic of designing an offering that people cannot resist. You make the decision so easy that the only natural response is yes. And in a marketplace full of confusion and noise, clarity is a competitive advantage few can match. Finding a blue ocean is exciting. Designing an offering that customers instantly understand is thrilling. But then comes the real test: getting it to actually happen. This is where many great ideas die, not because they are bad ideas, but because they never survive the internal battles, the skepticism, or the inertia that lives inside every organization. Imagine you are the leader of a company, and you propose something completely different from what has been done before. It might mean shifting budgets, changing how people work, or taking resources away from current projects. Even if the idea is brilliant, the first reaction from many will be resistance. People are comfortable with the familiar, and the unfamiliar feels risky. Take the example of Ford in the early 2000s with the creation of the Ford Escape Hybrid. The company was known for big trucks and SUVs, but environmental awareness was growing. A few people inside Ford saw an opportunity to appeal to a new kind of customer, one who cared about fuel efficiency and reducing emissions but still wanted the practicality of an SUV. Convincing the company to invest in this was not easy. There were engineers who doubted the technology, marketers who feared the traditional audience would not respond, and executives worried about the cost. The project only succeeded because its leaders kept showing the potential demand and highlighting how competitors were not serving this audience. They used small wins and data to build momentum, turning skeptics into supporters. Overcoming resistance often starts with involving people early. When employees feel like changes are simply handed down from above, they see them as threats. But when they are invited into the process, asked for their input, and shown how they will benefit, they start to take ownership. This is what happened at NTT Docomo, a Japanese mobile operator. When they developed the iMode mobile internet service, it was unlike anything their team had done before. Instead of just announcing the change, leaders brought engineers, marketers, and customer service together from the start, letting them shape the product. The result was not only a smoother launch but also a workforce that was proud of the innovation. Another big challenge is winning over external partners and customers. If your idea disrupts the usual way of doing things, suppliers, distributors, or even customers might hesitate. When Netflix shifted from DVD rentals to streaming, their biggest fear was whether customers would be willing to give up physical discs. So they made the change gradual. They allowed customers to have both services for a while, building comfort before fully embracing streaming. They also worked hard to get studios on board, showing them how streaming could open up new revenue streams. Sometimes the resistance comes from fear of failure. People imagine the worst-case scenario and freeze. Blue Ocean leaders address this by reducing perceived risk. They do not just say, "Trust me, it will work." They run pilot programs, create prototypes, and test in smaller markets before going big. This way, success is visible, and failure, if it happens, is small and fixable. Consider the case of Zappos, the online shoe retailer. The idea of selling shoes online seemed risky. After all, people want to try shoes on. Founder Nick Swinmurn reduced the risk by offering free returns, no questions asked. That single decision changed the game. Customers could try shoes at home without worrying about wasting money. Internally, it also helped convince investors and employees that the idea could work. Communication plays a massive role here. If you are trying to move an organization into a blue ocean, you have to keep the story alive. People need to hear not just the plan but the why behind it, why it matters, why it is urgent, and how it benefits them. This is what Starbucks' Howard Schultz did when he returned to lead the company during a downturn. He told employees and investors that Starbucks had lost its soul, becoming too focused on speed and profits instead of the experience. His blue ocean was to restore Starbucks as a place of connection. By constantly repeating this vision, he aligned everyone toward the same goal. In some cases, you may need to create what the authors call tipping point leadership. Instead of trying to convince everyone, focus on the key influencers, the people whose support will sway others. In a large organization, these might be department heads or respected veterans. If they believe in the change, they will help bring others on board. Executing a blue ocean move is not about forcing change overnight. It is about creating a current strong enough that people start moving with you, even if they were unsure at first. Small wins, clear communication, visible benefits, and reduced risk, these are the oars that keep you moving forward. The truth is, a great idea is only as good as its execution. Without bringing your team, partners, and customers along for the journey, even the clearest blue ocean can slip away. But when you get it right, the transformation is powerful. The people who once doubted you become your biggest advocates, and the company begins to see itself not just as part of a competitive race, but as a pioneer sailing toward open waters. Discovering a blue ocean is thrilling. Executing it is a victory. But there is one more challenge that many businesses underestimate: keeping that blue ocean from turning red. A blue ocean does not stay untouched forever. If you are successful, competitors will notice. They will study your model, try to copy it, and gradually crowd into your space. The question is not if they will come, but when. The real key is to keep moving, to stay ahead by innovating before the waters get crowded. Cirque du Soleil is a perfect example. They started by redefining the circus. They removed costly elements like animal acts, added storytelling, theater-quality performances, and targeted adult audiences willing to pay premium prices. For years, they had the blue ocean all to themselves. But instead of getting comfortable, they kept creating new shows with different themes, music, and artistic styles. Even when competitors tried to imitate them, Cirque du Soleil's audience stayed loyal because they were always offering something fresh. In contrast, think about BlackBerry. In the early 2000s, they created their own blue ocean in mobile communication, secure, mobile email on a handheld device. For a time, they dominated. But they stopped evolving. When Apple introduced the iPhone and redefined what a phone could do, BlackBerry stayed focused on its old strengths, believing its niche was secure. Within a few years, their ocean had turned red, and they were barely afloat. Sustaining a blue ocean requires a mindset that you are never finished. You have to keep asking, what is next? How can we make this better? How can we surprise our customers again? Netflix has mastered this. They moved from DVD rentals to streaming before their DVD business had even peaked. Then, when streaming competitors started multiplying, they pivoted into producing original content like House of Cards and Stranger Things. Now they are experimenting with interactive storytelling and gaming. Each move has kept them in uncontested waters. Sometimes, sustaining your blue ocean means deepening the value you already offer rather than expanding too quickly. Patagonia, the outdoor clothing company, built its blue ocean on high-quality, environmentally responsible products. As sustainability became a trend and other brands tried to copy their approach, Patagonia doubled down on its mission. They introduced repair programs to extend the life of their clothing, donated profits to environmental causes, and even told customers not to buy what they did not need. This authenticity made their position even stronger, turning their values into a competitive moat that imitators could not easily cross. Another important factor is listening closely to your customers, not just through surveys but by observing their behavior. Often, your next blue ocean move comes from seeing how people are actually using your product. Instagram started as a location-based check-in app called Burb. But its founders noticed that users were mostly sharing photos and reacting to them. They stripped away everything else and focused on photos with filters. That shift created a new space in social media, and for years, they owned it. Technology changes, tastes evolve, and new needs emerge. If you are not scanning the horizon, your blue ocean can vanish faster than you think. Think about Blockbuster. They had the chance to buy Netflix early on but dismissed streaming as a niche idea. While they kept focusing on late fees and in-store rentals, Netflix sailed into a new ocean and Blockbuster drowned. One of the most effective ways to sustain your blue ocean is to build a culture that embraces change. If your people are trained to protect the status quo, they will resist new opportunities. But if they see change as part of their DNA, they will help you spot and seize the next wave. Amazon operates this way. Even as one of the largest companies in the world, they keep experimenting with cloud services, smart devices, logistics innovations, and even healthcare. Their willingness to disrupt themselves keeps their competitors chasing rather than catching up. Finally, remember that sustaining a blue ocean is not about constant reinvention for its own sake. It is about staying relevant to your audience. The moment your product feels outdated or predictable, you open the door for someone else to take your place. That is why leaders in blue oceans always keep a portion of their focus on the future new trends, emerging technologies, shifting lifestyles while still nurturing what makes them unique today. A blue ocean is not a one-time discovery, it is a way of thinking. It is about always looking for the next open water, even while enjoying the one you are in. It is about staying curious, agile, and committed to delivering value in ways no one else can. The companies that survive and thrive are not the ones who find a blue ocean once and sit still. They are the ones who make navigating uncharted waters a permanent part of who they are. And when you do that, your blue ocean never has to turn red. And so, as we come to the end of Blue Ocean Strategy, it is worth stepping back and remembering the journey we have taken. We began in crowded, bloody waters, the red oceans where businesses fight over the same shrinking space, lowering prices, cutting margins, and wearing themselves out in a battle that nobody truly wins. Then, we explored a different path. The blue ocean's wide, open, unexplored spaces where competition is irrelevant because you are not fighting for a share of the same pie. You are baking a new one. We saw how companies like Cirque du Soleil, Nintendo, and Netflix created these spaces by looking beyond the limits of their industries and focusing on what customers truly value. We learned that discovering a blue ocean is not about luck. It is about seeing patterns others miss, asking bold questions, and having the courage to step away from the herd. We also saw that execution is just as important as the idea. Without bringing people along, without addressing their fears and showing them the vision, even the clearest blue ocean strategy will sink. And finally, we understood that the journey does not end once you find your blue ocean. Competitors will notice. The waters will start to crowd. Sustaining your advantage means continuing to innovate, to listen, to adapt, and to keep moving toward new horizons. The message of this book is not just for big companies. It is for anyone, an entrepreneur starting from scratch, a small business owner, a leader in a large organization, or even an individual looking to stand out in their career. The principle is the same: stop competing where everyone else is fighting and instead find a place where you set the rules. Blue oceans are out there, waiting to be discovered. They are not always obvious, and they are rarely comfortable. But the rewards: freedom from cutthroat competition, the excitement of creation, the satisfaction of making something truly unique are worth the risk. So, whether you are building a business, designing a product, or shaping your own path in life, remember this: you do not have to fight over scraps in a crowded sea. You can sail into open water. You can create your own blue ocean. This has been Blue Ocean Strategy by W. Chan Kim and Renee Mauborgne, brought to you by Books Arena. I hope this journey has inspired you to see your industry, your work, and your potential with fresh eyes. Now, it is time to set sail. The horizon is yours. Welcome to Books Arena. In this audiobook, we will explore Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This is the story of a boy who was born into a system that made his existence illegal. It is the story of growing up in apartheid and post-apartheid South Africa, a country divided by race, language, and poverty. But it is also the story of a strong mother, a clever child, and the power of humor and language to survive the impossible. Trevor Noah was born in 1984 to a black Xhosa mother and a white Swiss father. At the time, South Africa's apartheid laws made interracial relationships illegal. That meant Trevor's very existence was considered a crime. He could not walk openly with either of his parents. He had to be hidden. His mother often had to pretend to be his nanny, walking on the other side of the street so they would not be seen together. His mother, Patricia Noah, is one of the most powerful figures in the book. She was brave, stubborn, deeply religious, and determined to give her son a better life. She broke the rules not out of rebellion, but because she believed her son deserved more than what the system allowed. She taught him English so he could rise above his environment. She took him to 3 churches every Sunday to protect his soul. And she made sure he knew how to think for himself. Growing up, Trevor was never truly part of any group. He was not black enough to be accepted by black kids. He was not white. And he was not quite colored, the mixed race category in South Africa. But instead of letting this make him feel lost, Trevor used it to his advantage. He learned to speak many languages. He became a listener, an observer. He figured out how to belong anywhere by becoming anyone. In this audiobook, we will break down Born a Crime into 7 parts. Each part will explore different stories from Trevor's life, from childhood to his teenage years to young adulthood. We will look at how he learned to survive poverty, racism, domestic violence, and more. But we will also see how he found joy, laughter, and meaning in even the hardest times. This is more than just a story about South Africa. It is about the universal experience of feeling like an outsider. It is about the love between a mother and a son. And it is about using what you have: your voice, your wit, your mind, to change your life. So join me, here on Books Arena, as we begin this incredible journey through Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Part 1, Born a Crime. Trevor Noah was born during apartheid in South Africa. Apartheid was a system where laws separated people based on their race. Under the system, it was illegal for a white person and a black person to have a relationship. But Trevor's mother, Patricia, was black, and his father, Robert, was white. Their relationship was a crime. So when Trevor was born, he was literally born a crime. His mother had to hide him from the world. She could not walk down the street holding his hand. If the police saw them together, they might take Trevor away or arrest her. To protect him, she would walk on one side of the street, and Trevor would walk on the other. Sometimes, she told people she was just the maid. His father could not be seen with him either. When they spent time together, it was always in secret. Trevor's mother was a very strong and smart woman. She knew how dangerous the world was, but she still chose to have a child. She believed in God, and she believed in doing what was right, even when it was against the law. She raised Trevor with love, discipline, and faith. She spoke English with him because she believed that speaking English would open doors. In South Africa, English was the language of education, business, and government. Patricia taught Trevor to read early. She made him go to church every Sunday 3 times. In the morning, they went to a white church. In the afternoon, a mixed-race church. And in the evening, a black church. She believed it was important for Trevor to see all kinds of people and understand how they worshipped and lived. Their life was not easy. They were poor, and they lived in places where they were not always welcome. But Patricia made sure Trevor never felt like a victim. She taught him to be proud of himself. She taught him that he was special, not because he was mixed race, but because he was loved and chosen. Trevor learned early on how to adapt. He could not fit in with just one group, so he became good at fitting in with everyone. He learned different languages: Zulu, Xhosa, Tswana, Afrikaans, and English. When he spoke to people in their own language, they trusted him more. He used language to make friends, to avoid trouble, and to understand the world around him. One powerful story from this part of the book is when Trevor and his mother were in a minibus taxi. The driver started acting strange and dangerous. Patricia noticed something was wrong and made a quick decision. She opened the door and told Trevor to jump out of the moving van. He was scared but did it. She jumped right after him. They rolled on the ground and escaped safely. That story shows how quick-thinking and brave his mother was. She would do anything to protect her son. Being mixed race in South Africa at that time was confusing. Black kids sometimes made fun of him because he looked too light. White people saw him as black. Colored people saw him as different from them too. He did not belong to any group fully. But instead of letting that hurt him, Trevor used it. He watched, he listened, and he learned how people acted. This skill, being able to read people, became very important in his life. Many children around the world grow up between cultures, between languages, or between communities. Trevor's story shows how painful that can be, but also how it can be powerful. Children who learn how to move between worlds often grow up strong, smart, and understanding. They know how to talk to people from all walks of life. They learn how to solve problems and how to stay safe. In this part of Born a Crime, we see the foundation of who Trevor is. A boy who was not supposed to exist. A boy raised by a mother who broke the rules to give him a better life. A boy who learned how to survive by being smart, by being funny, and by being kind. This is just the beginning of his story. Part 2, The Language of Belonging. When Trevor started school, he faced a new kind of challenge. At home, he was used to being different. But school made those differences even more clear. He was placed in a school where the children were mostly white or colored. He was one of the few mixed-race kids and one of the very few who spoke multiple African languages. Most people did not know where to place him. Was he black? Was he white? Was he colored? He did not fit in neatly anywhere. But instead of feeling lost, Trevor found a secret power: he could speak to everyone. He used language like a bridge. Trevor spoke English, which helped him succeed in school. But he also spoke Zulu, Xhosa, Tswana, and Afrikaans. He listened to how people spoke and picked up their words and rhythms. When he spoke to someone in their own language, their attitude changed. They smiled. They welcomed him. They trusted him. One day, some boys tried to bully him. They were speaking Zulu, not knowing he understood them. Trevor waited, then answered them in perfect Zulu. The boys were shocked and then they laughed. They backed off. That moment taught him something big: when you speak someone's language, you are no longer a stranger. His ability to switch languages helped him survive in a divided country. It also helped him make friends across racial lines. While other kids stuck to their own group, Trevor moved between them. At lunch, he might play soccer with the black kids. Later, he would joke with the colored kids using their slang. He was like water, able to flow into any space. But not everything came easy. Even though apartheid was over on paper, the school system still had deep divisions. Black kids often had fewer resources. Some teachers treated them with less respect. There were invisible rules everywhere. Trevor learned to spot them and avoid trouble. He also learned how to stand out for the right reasons. He started using humor to win people over. If he could make the class laugh, the teacher saw him as clever, not disruptive. If he could make the tough kids laugh, they would leave him alone. Jokes became his way of controlling the room. At home, life was getting more complicated. Trevor's stepfather, Abel, entered the picture. At first, Abel seemed like a good man, friendly, hardworking, and charming. But slowly, his temper began to show. He drank too much. He became violent. Trevor and his mother were often scared, but his mother tried to stay strong. She believed things would get better. She prayed. She hoped. She protected Trevor the best she could. Through all this, Trevor kept learning. He paid attention to how people acted and spoke. He copied voices. He told stories. He made jokes. Even when things were dark at home, he used humor to keep his spirit alive. Outside school, he started to hustle. He sold candy to classmates. Later, he would sell music CDs in the neighborhood. These small businesses taught him a lot about people, what they liked, how they made decisions, and how they responded to confidence. Trevor realized he did not need a lot of money or power to succeed. He just needed creativity, courage, and the ability to connect with others. Trevor's life during this time was full of contradictions. He lived in a country where laws had changed, but many hearts had not. He lived in a home with love and danger at the same time. He belonged everywhere and nowhere. But instead of giving up, he kept finding ways to move forward. Part 3, The Hustle begins. As Trevor became a teenager, his world began to change even more. He was no longer a small boy hiding from the rules of apartheid. Now, he was growing up in a free South Africa, but that freedom did not mean life was easy. It just meant he had new choices to make, and new problems to solve. Trevor started to explore the world outside of school more deeply. He spent more time with friends in the township of Alexandra, one of the poorest and most crowded places in Johannesburg. Life in Alexandra was tough, but it was also full of energy, music, and survival. People there knew how to make a little go a long way. Trevor was a curious and smart teenager. He was always looking for ways to earn money. He knew his mother worked hard, and he wanted to help himself too. One of his first real hustles was burning CDs. He had access to a computer, which many people around him did not. He downloaded music, burned it onto blank CDs, and sold them. He understood what people wanted: popular songs, love songs, gospel music, and he gave it to them. Before long, he had a small business. He even hired others to help him. One friend ran the music stand. Another helped with collections. Trevor managed the money. He was not just a hustler, he was a young entrepreneur. But selling music was not just about money. It was also about identity. In a place where people wore knock-off shoes and second-hand clothes, music was one way they could express themselves. People felt powerful when they heard their favorite songs. Trevor gave them that feeling, and they loved him for it. Still, there were risks. One day, a group of police officers stopped Trevor and his friend. They thought he was doing something illegal. They searched him and asked where he got the CDs. Trevor, as always, stayed calm. He knew how to talk his way out of trouble. That skill, using words and humor, helped him avoid danger more than once. At home, things were becoming harder. His stepfather Abel's drinking got worse. He became violent more often. Trevor and his mother lived with fear. But even during this hard time, his mother continued to support him. She still took him to church. She still pushed him to read. She believed that knowledge and faith could protect them. Trevor also started to discover the power of storytelling. He would tell stories to his friends about things that happened at school, at home, or on the street. People listened to him. They laughed. They paid attention. This was the early sign of the comedian he would later become. One day, Trevor tried something new. He started a small business helping people write love letters. Many of the boys in the township had crushes on girls, but they did not know how to express their feelings. Trevor wrote letters for them, using sweet words and poetic lines. The girls loved the letters, and the boys loved the results. Trevor had once again found a way to make something out of nothing. But things were not always smooth. Some people felt jealous of his success. Others tried to cheat him. Trevor learned to be careful about who to trust. He learned that not everyone who smiled at you was a friend. These lessons were hard, but they were real. Part 4, Love, Lies, and Lessons. As Trevor entered his late teens, he began to experience more of life's emotional highs and lows. He was still hustling, still making money through his CD business, and still moving between different social groups using humor, language, and charm. But now, new challenges were entering his life, especially around love and relationships. Trevor tells the story of his first real romantic relationship with a girl named Maylene. He was shy, nervous, and unsure how to talk to girls. But with the help of his friend, Teddy, he managed to start dating her. They spent time together after school, and Trevor believed he was finally experiencing love. However, there was a problem. Trevor did not speak directly to Maylene very much. Most of their communication went through Teddy. Trevor thought this was normal until the day of the school dance, when he asked Maylene to go with him. She looked confused and said she was already going with Teddy. Trevor was crushed. He had been used. His friend had been dating her the whole time. Trevor had been writing letters and buying snacks, but Maylene had never actually been his girlfriend. It was a painful lesson in trust, communication, and the importance of speaking for yourself. This was not the only time Trevor would be disappointed in love. He tells another story about dating a beautiful girl named Biography. He invited her to a school dance and was proud to be seen with someone so attractive. But when he tried to talk to her at the dance, she said nothing. Only later did he find out she did not speak any of the same languages as him. They had no way to communicate. It was a funny and sad moment that showed how much can go wrong when people assume instead of asking questions. These stories are filled with humor, but they also teach serious lessons. In both cases, Trevor thought things were going well, but he missed the most important part: real connection. His experiences show that love, like everything else in life, requires effort, honesty, and clear communication. Outside of romance, Trevor was also learning more about the larger world. He was beginning to understand how money, race, and status affected people's choices. For example, in the township where he sold CDs, many people saw him as successful. But when he went to more affluent neighborhoods, he saw how far behind he really was. He was living in two different South Africas, one full of poverty and hustle, and one full of wealth and privilege. He began to feel the pressure of choosing his path. Would he continue hustling, or would he try something bigger? His mother always pushed him toward education, faith, and a better future. But he was also tempted by quick money, popularity, and street life. At home, things were still dangerous. His stepfather Abel's violence had not stopped. Trevor's mother had tried to leave him, but the legal system failed to protect her. Abel was still around, still drinking, still angry. Trevor hated him, but he also feared him. His mother stayed strong, but even her strength had limits. One moment that stands out in this part of the book is when Trevor gets a job at a call center. It is one of his first formal jobs, and it shows him a different kind of work: organized, professional, and structured. He learns how to deal with difficult customers, how to speak clearly, and how to stay patient. It is not his dream job, but it gives him new skills and helps him see the world beyond the township. Throughout these teenage years, Trevor continues to use his greatest tools: language, humor, and observation. He watches how people behave, and he adjusts. He is always learning. Even when things go wrong, he finds a way to turn them into stories. That ability to reflect, to laugh at himself, and to keep going is what makes his journey powerful. Here at Books Arena, we see how Trevor's teenage mistakes and heartbreaks are not just funny stories. They are lessons about identity, self-worth, and finding your voice. Many people go through similar experiences, feeling left out, getting hurt in relationships, or trying to fit in. Trevor shows us that even these painful moments can lead to growth. Part 5, Dancing with Danger. By the time Trevor was in his late teens, he had built a full street business. He was no longer just burning CDs, he was also selling video games, doing small tech repairs, and even buying and reselling second-hand items. He had learned how to make money in a world where jobs were scarce, and the system was not designed for young black men to succeed. But with more business came more risk. Trevor's closest business partner during this time was a boy named Sizwe. Sizwe was street smart, quiet, and always focused. He had grown up in the tough township of Alexandra and knew how to survive there. Together, they made a good team. Trevor handled the ideas and planning, and Sizwe handled the operations and the street side of things. One of their biggest successes came from selling pirated CDs and DVDs. In the early 2000s, these were very popular. Most people could not afford original versions, so Trevor and Sizwe provided what people wanted at a lower cost. They knew it was technically illegal, but they also knew that for many people in the township, this was the only way to access entertainment. Trevor became known as the CD guy. He even started DJing at parties. He would bring his sound system, play music, and entertain crowds. At one party, things went wrong when someone got shot outside. It was a wake-up call. Trevor realized that even if he was just the DJ, danger was always nearby. Still, he kept hustling. He made enough money to buy nicer clothes, help out at home, and even consider moving into better circles. But deep down, he knew this was not a long-term path. The streets had rules, and breaking them could cost you your life. One powerful story in this part of the book is about Trevor's friend Tom. Tom was one of the few white kids who would visit the townships. One day, Tom accidentally said something disrespectful to a local gang member. The situation turned serious very quickly. Trevor had to step in, speak the local language, and calm the situation down. That moment reminded him of how fragile peace was and how quickly things could fall apart. At the same time, life at home was not improving. His stepfather Abel had opened his own garage business, but his drinking made things worse. He was jealous of Trevor's success. He insulted Trevor. He abused his mother. Trevor wanted to fight back, but he was still afraid. His mother was doing everything she could to protect both of them, but the violence kept coming. Even with all the stress at home and on the street, Trevor never stopped learning. He studied people. He studied the system. He used humor to keep people on his side. He learned how to calm angry customers, deal with police, and avoid fights. These skills were not taught in school, but they were just as important for survival. One day, Trevor's business came crashing down. A local criminal broke into his storage place and stole all his stock CDs, speakers, games, and money. It was a huge loss. Trevor was devastated. But instead of giving up, he did what he always did: he adapted. He accepted the loss, learned from it, and started to think about new paths. At Books Arena, we often highlight how real-life challenges shape character. Trevor's experiences in this part of the book show how easy it is for young people to get pulled into dangerous situations when they are just trying to survive. But they also show how important it is to be smart, flexible, and aware. Trevor's story is not just about making money. It is about figuring out who you are in a world that keeps trying to define you. Even when he was close to real danger, he never lost sight of the future. He always believed that he could do more if he just kept learning, watching, and growing. Part 6, The Breaking Point. As Trevor entered early adulthood, the danger at home finally reached a boiling point. For years, his stepfather Abel had controlled the household through fear and violence. Trevor and his mother had tried everything: staying quiet, praying, moving out, but nothing worked for long. Abel's anger always found its way back to them. Trevor had grown used to fear. It had become part of daily life. But as he became older and stronger, he started to push back. He was no longer a small boy. He was now a young man, and he hated seeing his mother suffer. The tension between Trevor and Abel grew worse each day. Trevor had always been careful to avoid direct fights with Abel. He knew that his stepfather was dangerous. But the day came when everything changed. One night, after another violent argument, Abel shot Trevor's mother. She had finally decided to leave him for good. She had packed her things and walked away. Abel followed her to the street, pulled out a gun, and shot her in the back of the head. Then he shot her again in the leg. Trevor got the call and rushed to the hospital. He thought she was dead. Everyone did. But something unbelievable happened. His mother survived. The bullet that hit her in the head had passed through her skull without touching the brain. It had gone in and out, missing everything vital. It was nothing short of a miracle. When Trevor saw her in the hospital, he was filled with shock and relief. She smiled at him and said, "This could have been worse." That moment changed Trevor forever. He had lived through poverty, racism, rejection, and fear, but now he had come face to face with death in his own family. He realized that life was fragile, and time was limited. He had to act. He had to move forward. He tried to take legal action against Abel. But the police did not take it seriously. They told Trevor that because his mother had survived, the case was not urgent. They did not even arrest Abel at first. It was a painful reminder that the justice system did not protect women like his mother. It also showed how broken South Africa's laws still were, even years after apartheid had ended. Trevor was furious. But his mother, once again, remained calm. She forgave Abel. She said that holding on to anger would only destroy her from the inside. That strength shocked Trevor. He could not understand how she could forgive the man who tried to kill her. But she explained that forgiveness was not about him, it was about her own peace. Trevor's mother taught him the most important lesson of his life that day. No matter what people do to you, you have the power to choose your response. You can choose anger, or you can choose peace. You can choose to be a victim, or you can choose to be a survivor. This moment became a turning point in Trevor's life. He began to see his story differently. He realized that he had something rare: a mother who never gave up, a life that had survived violence, and a voice that could reach others. It was around this time that Trevor began thinking more seriously about comedy. He had always told jokes and funny stories to survive. Now, he wanted to use those stories to help others. He saw comedy not just as entertainment, but as a way to heal, to connect, and to tell the truth. At Books Arena, we believe stories like this remind us how strong people can be, even in the worst situations. Trevor's mother should not have had to survive a gunshot to teach the world a lesson, but she did. And from her pain came hope, wisdom, and an example that has inspired millions. This part of Born a Crime is emotional and powerful. It reminds us that behind every strong person is often a story full of pain. But it also reminds us that pain does not have to be the end. It can be the beginning of something greater. Part 7, Finding His Voice. After everything Trevor had been through: poverty, racism, heartbreak, near-death experiences, he stood at a crossroads. His mother had survived being shot. His hustle business was behind him. He had no university degree. He did not have a job. But he had something more powerful than all of that: his voice. Trevor always knew how to make people laugh. It had been his way of surviving as a child who did not fit in anywhere. He used humor to make people feel comfortable. He used it to avoid getting bullied. And now, as a young man in South Africa's new democracy, he began to realize that humor could also be his career. He started small, doing comedy sets at local clubs and events. At first, he was nervous. He doubted himself. But then something happened. People laughed. Not just a little, but a lot. He had a natural gift. He told stories that people related to. He spoke in different languages. He jumped between cultures. He connected people who were usually divided. In a country still healing from apartheid, this was powerful. Comedy was not just about jokes, it was about truth. Trevor would talk about racism, poverty, corruption, and daily life in a way that made people laugh, but also think. His voice became a bridge. He helped people see the world from different points of view. At one show, he joked about how speaking Afrikaans had once made him a target, but now, it made him funny. The very thing that once made him feel unsafe was now helping him connect with the crowd. This was a key lesson: our weaknesses can become strengths when we learn how to use them. Trevor's popularity grew. He started performing on radio and TV. He got invited to comedy festivals. His work caught the attention of international comedians, and soon, he was traveling the world. It was a long way from the townships of Soweto and Alexandra. But even as he rose in fame, he never forgot where he came from. He kept telling stories about his childhood, his mother, and his wild journey through South Africa's broken system. That honesty became the heart of his voice. It made him stand out. One example from real life that mirrors Trevor's journey is the story of Kevin Hart. Like Trevor, Kevin grew up in a poor, challenging environment with a difficult father. He used humor as a tool to deal with pain. Both comedians turned their past struggles into material that not only entertained but inspired people. Trevor did not become a global star overnight. There were still struggles. He faced racism even outside of South Africa. He was told he would never make it in America. But he kept going, one joke at a time. Eventually, his work led him to something many thought was impossible: a spot as the host of The Daily Show in the United States. When he was chosen to replace Jon Stewart, some people were confused. How could a kid from South Africa take over such an important show? But Trevor proved them wrong. He brought fresh ideas, global stories, and a unique voice. He showed that humor crosses borders. That pain and laughter exist in every country. That one person's story, when told well, can speak to millions. At Books Arena, we believe Born a Crime is not just a memoir, it is a lesson in courage. Trevor Noah's life teaches us that it does not matter where you start. What matters is how you respond to what life throws at you. His journey is a reminder that your voice, your real, honest voice, is your most powerful tool. In this final part of the book, Trevor is no longer just surviving. He is thriving. He has turned all the chaos of his past into a life with purpose. And while his story is unique, the message is universal: you can rise above your circumstances. You can heal. You can grow. And you can tell your story in a way that helps others find hope in their own. Thank you for following along with us through Born a Crime. Join us here at Books Arena for the final closing message, where we reflect on Trevor Noah's journey and what it means for all of us. Welcome to Books Arena. Today, we're diving into the life of one of the most iconic and misunderstood minds in modern history, Steve Jobs. But this isn't the story you think you know. Becoming Steve Jobs by Brand Schoolender and Rick Tetsley is not your typical biography. It doesn't just focus on the legend, it shows the man behind the image. Not just the bold decisions, but the doubts, the failures, the growth. Most people know Steve Jobs as a genius, someone who changed the world with Apple products like the iPhone, the iPad, and the Mac. But few people understand how he became that visionary. Because in the beginning, Steve Jobs was impulsive, difficult, and often reckless. He was brilliant, yes, but also immature and unpredictable. So what changed? This book shows how Steve evolved, not suddenly, but over time. From a fiery young founder who got fired from his own company, to a thoughtful, patient leader who built the most valuable company on earth. It's a journey of failure, reflection, and transformation. So if you've ever wondered, what made Steve Jobs so driven? What did he learn from being rejected? How did he go from arrogant to admired? Then this summary is for you. Let's begin the journey of becoming Steve Jobs. A story about learning, changing, and becoming someone greater than you were yesterday. Part 1, The Early Years, a Rebel with Vision. Steve Jobs was born in 1955 in San Francisco and adopted shortly after by Paul and Clara Jobs, a modest and hard-working couple. From the start, Steve was different. He was curious, intense, and often difficult to manage, a mix of rebelliousness and raw intelligence. In school, Steve was bright but bored. He questioned authority, challenged teachers, and refused to do things just because others said so. One teacher said, if he decided it was worth doing, he'd do it brilliantly. But if not, he just wouldn't do it at all. This was a pattern that followed Steve throughout his early life. He operated on his own terms. As a teenager growing up in Silicon Valley, Steve was drawn to electronics. His father, a mechanic and craftsman, taught him how to take things apart and put them back together. Steve saw firsthand how design and function could work in harmony, a lesson he would carry into his work at Apple decades later. But while his father focused on craftsmanship, Steve was more interested in ideas, especially those that pushed boundaries. He read spiritual books, practiced meditation, and experimented with alternative lifestyles. He even went to India in search of enlightenment. But don't mistake this for a calm, peaceful mindset. Steve was known to be impatient, demanding, and even rude at times. He had strong opinions and didn't hesitate to share them, often bluntly. Still, something about him was magnetic. Even at a young age, people noticed that he had a way of pulling others into his vision. The Wozniak connection. In high school, Steve met Steve Wozniak, an engineering genius and fellow prankster. Woz was quiet, thoughtful, and brilliant at building computers. Jobs saw in Woz something valuable, not just a friend, but a partner. The two collaborated on small tech projects. One of their early creations was the Blue Box, a device that let you make free long-distance calls by tricking the phone system. It was illegal, but it showed them something important: with the right mix of creativity and technology, they could build things people wanted. That realization would lead them to their biggest creation, Apple. Founding Apple. In 1976, in the Jobs family garage, Steve and Wozniak founded Apple Computer. Woz built the machines. Jobs pitched the vision. Their first product, the Apple I, was simple but groundbreaking, a personal computer that hobbyists could use without building one from scratch. But it was the Apple II that made Apple a real business. It had color graphics, a keyboard, and a sleek design. More importantly, it brought computing to the average person. Steve Jobs quickly became the face of Apple. Young, confident, and unconventional, he stood out in the tech industry. He didn't wear suits. He talked about design and philosophy, not just hardware. And he pushed his team to aim higher than anyone thought possible. But here's the catch: he was also very difficult to work with. Jobs demanded perfection. He would insult engineers if their work didn't meet his expectations. He made decisions on gut feeling. He could be charming one moment and dismissive the next. People either loved working with him, or couldn't take it and left. The Macintosh and the limits of vision. Steve's biggest passion became the Macintosh, a new kind of computer with a graphical interface, something no one else had done before. He wanted it to be beautiful, intuitive, and revolutionary. And it was, but it also exposed his flaws as a leader. Jobs pushed the Mac team mercilessly. He expected them to work day and night. He rejected good ideas because they didn't fit his vision. And he ignored advice from more experienced managers. The Macintosh launched in 1984 with huge fanfare. The commercial was iconic. The product was stunning. But it was also too expensive and underpowered. Sales didn't meet expectations. Apple's board of directors grew worried. Steve was a visionary, but they questioned whether he could actually run a company. By 1985, tensions boiled over. Steve was removed from his leadership role and eventually left Apple altogether. The first turning point. Here's what's important to understand. This version of Steve Jobs, brilliant, intense, but immature, is not the Steve Jobs who created the iPhone. This was Steve at the beginning of his journey. Yes, he had bold ideas. Yes, he pushed boundaries. But he hadn't yet learned how to lead with humility, how to listen, or how to build something that could last beyond his energy alone. Becoming Steve Jobs shows that greatness isn't just about having vision. It's about growing into the kind of person who can turn that vision into reality with others, not just in spite of them. The early years of Steve Jobs were filled with genius, conflict, and flashes of brilliance. But the best was yet to come. Part 2, The Fall and the Learning Years, Next and Pixar. After being pushed out of Apple in 1985, Steve Jobs was just 30 years old. He was famous. He was wealthy. But he was also lost. For the first time, he had no company, no team, no product to obsess over. And more importantly, no clear direction. He later called it the best thing that ever happened to him. But at the time, it felt like total failure. So what did he do? He started again. From scratch. Next, a new company, same old habits. Soon after leaving Apple, Steve launched a new company called Next Inc. The goal was ambitious: to build the world's most powerful computer, one designed specifically for education and creative professionals. Jobs poured his energy and millions of his own dollars into the company. He wanted Next to be perfect, even revolutionary. But here's the catch: Steve hadn't really changed yet. He was still chasing perfection over practicality. He still micromanaged. He still let design overpower deadlines. The first Next computer was beautiful. It had a sleek black cube design. The operating system was advanced and elegant. But it was also too expensive and too complex for the market. Schools couldn't afford it. Developers found it difficult to work with. The product failed commercially. In the outside world, people started saying Steve Jobs had peaked early, that Apple was a fluke, and he wasn't capable of running a real business after all. But something different was happening behind the scenes. The shift begins: personal growth at Next. At Next, Steve hired new people, engineers, designers, marketers. And for the first time, he started to listen. Not always. Not perfectly. But more than before. He became more open to feedback. He didn't yell as often. He gave his team space to solve problems on their own. He also started to understand something he had missed at Apple. A great company isn't just built on great ideas. It's built on great people. And while Next didn't succeed as a hardware business, it produced something very important: its software platform. That software, called Next Step, was incredibly advanced. And years later, Apple would buy Next not for the hardware, but for that software. That software became the foundation for Mac OS, iOS, and the modern Apple ecosystem. So even though Next looked like a failure, it planted the seeds of Apple's future. Pixar, learning patience, trust, and creativity. While Next struggled, Steve also invested in a small animation studio called Pixar, which he bought from George Lucas. At first, Pixar wasn't about animated movies. It made software and short films, mainly for other companies. Jobs funded it, but he didn't fully understand the animation side. And that turned out to be a good thing. Why? Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't the expert. He had to trust the creative team, people like Ed Catmull, John Lasseter, and Brad Bird, to do the work. He couldn't micromanage animation. So he stood back. And slowly, something changed in Steve Jobs. He began to appreciate collaboration. He saw the power of letting creative people lead as long as they had a clear mission and support. Pixar's first big breakthrough was Toy Story in 1995, the first full-length computer animated film. It was a global hit. Jobs didn't write it. He didn't direct it. But he made it possible. He protected the creative team, funded them through hard years, and negotiated deals with Disney to give Pixar the freedom it needed. Pixar went on to become one of the most successful studios in film history. And Steve Jobs, the control freak, became a supporter of creativity, not just the driver of it. The inner transformation. What's important here isn't just the business outcomes. It's how these years reshaped Steve Jobs as a person. At Next, he learned humility through failure. At Pixar, he learned trust through collaboration. As a father, he began reconnecting with his daughter Lisa, whom he had once denied. And as a leader, he learned that greatness comes from teams, not just ideas. These experiences matured him. He was still intense. Still focused. Still had high standards. But he was becoming more thoughtful, more human, and more strategic. As one Pixar colleague put it, he learned to listen. Not just hear, but really listen. Laying the groundwork for a second act. By the mid-1990s, Steve Jobs was in a strange place. Pixar had become a success. Next was struggling but had powerful software. Apple, the company he founded, was on the verge of collapse. And then, Apple came calling. They needed new software. They needed vision. They needed help. In 1996, Apple bought Next for $429 million. And just like that, Steve Jobs was back at the company that had once fired him. But this time he was a different man. Smarter. Calmer. Wiser. The real Steve Jobs, the one who would lead Apple into its golden age, was finally ready. Part 3, The Return to Apple and the Birth of the iMac. In 1996, Apple was in serious trouble. The company that once revolutionized personal computing was now seen as outdated, slow, and almost irrelevant. Microsoft had taken over the market, and Apple's products were confusing, expensive, and failing to sell. Desperate, Apple made a bold move. They acquired Next, and with it, Steve Jobs. At first, Steve came back in a limited role. He was called an advisor, not a leader. But within months, it became clear, Apple needed more than advice, it needed vision. And Steve Jobs was ready. A new Steve Jobs returns. This was not the same Steve Jobs who had been fired 12 years earlier. Yes, he was still intense, demanding, and driven. But now, he was more thoughtful. More strategic. More capable of turning ideas into reality without burning everyone out in the process. He had matured, and Apple needed that maturity. The company was losing hundreds of millions of dollars. The product line was bloated with confusing models. The culture was unfocused. Jobs saw all of this and moved fast. First, he slashed the product line from dozens of machines to just 4 core categories. Consumer desktop. Consumer laptop. Professional desktop. Professional laptop. This move was shocking to Apple employees, but it brought clarity. For the first time in years, the company had a simple focus. He also cut unnecessary projects, streamlined teams, and started hiring smart, design-focused people, many of whom he had worked with at Next and Pixar. But Apple still needed more than focus. It needed a hit product. Enter the iMac. In 1998, Apple unveiled the iMac, a colorful, all-in-one computer that broke every rule of design. It wasn't beige. It wasn't boxy. It looked like something from the future, sleek, translucent, and fun. And more importantly, it was designed for regular people. It was simple to set up, easy to use, and visually exciting. Jobs worked closely with designer Johnny Ive, who would become one of his closest creative partners. Together, they obsessed over every detail, not just how the iMac worked, but how it felt. And the results were astonishing. The iMac became one of the fastest-selling computers in history. It brought Apple back into the spotlight. Suddenly, Apple was cool again. Why the iMac mattered so much? The iMac wasn't just a product, it was a statement. It said, Apple is back. It said, we care about design, not just specs. And it proved that Steve Jobs could still deliver breakthrough innovation, but now as a more mature, complete leader. More importantly, the iMac introduced a new way of thinking at Apple. Jobs began insisting that hardware, software, and design should be created together, tightly integrated, seamless, and user-focused. This idea would later become the foundation for the iPod, the iPhone, and everything that followed. Building a stronger culture. Behind the scenes, Jobs was rebuilding Apple's culture. He pushed teams to focus deeply on quality. He got rid of politics and silos. He made decisions quickly and expected others to do the same. But unlike the earlier Steve Jobs, he wasn't doing it alone. He empowered strong executives like Tim Cook, who would later become Apple CEO, and trusted them to execute. He still had high standards. He still expected excellence. But now, he had learned how to build a team and lead it. One Apple executive described the change this way. He used to be a tornado that left wreckage behind. Now he's a laser beam, focused and precise. Thinking ahead, the digital hub strategy. Even as Apple was recovering, Steve was already planning the next move. He believed the personal computer would become the digital hub for people's lives, connecting music, photos, video, and more. This idea became the roadmap for Apple's future. It led directly to the creation of iTunes, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. Jobs wasn't just trying to sell more computers. He was trying to redefine how we interact with technology. And for the first time, he had a team, a company, and a culture strong enough to do it. A new chapter begins. By the year 2000, Apple was no longer on life support. It was profitable. It was growing. And it was starting to lead again, not follow. Steve Jobs officially became CEO, dropping the interim title he had held since returning. But more than that, he had become something he had never been before. A trusted, admired, and capable CEO. The wild young founder who once got fired for being too reckless had now become the visionary leader of a company poised to change the world again. And he was just getting started. Part 4, The Age of Breakthroughs, the iPod, iTunes, and the dawn of a new era. By the early 2000s, Steve Jobs and Apple had found their footing again. The iMac's success was only the beginning. Steve was no longer just focused on making great computers, he had a bigger vision for how technology could transform everyday life. The digital hub vision comes to life. Steve saw the personal computer evolving into a digital hub, a central device where people could organize their digital lives, music, photos, videos, contacts, calendars, and more. But to truly realize this vision, Apple had to expand beyond just computers. This insight led to the birth of two game-changing products, the iPod and iTunes. The iPod, music, made simple. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod, a portable music player that would change the music industry forever. It wasn't the first digital music player on the market, but it was different. Steve and his team obsessed over design and user experience in ways no one else did. The iPod was small, elegant, and incredibly easy to use. Its signature click wheel made navigating thousands of songs effortless. And it worked seamlessly with Apple's software, a combination that competitors struggled to match. Steve famously said the iPod was 1,000 songs in your pocket. This simple phrase captured something revolutionary: music was now mobile, personal, and instantly accessible. But the iPod was just one piece of the puzzle. iTunes, reinventing the music business. To complement the iPod, Apple developed iTunes, a digital music management software. iTunes wasn't just a music player on the computer, it was a store, a way to buy and organize music legally and easily. At the time, the music industry was battling rampant piracy and struggling to adapt to the digital age. Steve negotiated tirelessly with record labels, convincing them to sell songs individually at 99 cents each, a radical idea. This led to the launch of the iTunes Store in 2003, which changed how people bought music forever. Now, consumers could buy songs on demand, legally, and at affordable prices. The music industry reacts. Initially skeptical, the music label soon realized iTunes was a lifeline against piracy. The combination of iPod hardware and iTunes software created an ecosystem that was incredibly sticky. Once you started using Apple's music platform, it was hard to leave. The iPod quickly became a cultural phenomenon, propelling Apple from a computer company to a consumer electronics giant. Lessons in leadership and focus. Behind these successes was Steve's relentless focus on simplicity and integration. He didn't want just a great product, he wanted a complete experience. Apple tightly controlled hardware and software, ensuring they worked flawlessly together. Steve was involved in every detail, from the white earbuds to the minimalist packaging. But this wasn't about ego, it was about creating products people loved. And crucially, Steve had grown in how he led teams to execute this vision. Instead of demanding perfection through fear and chaos, he fostered creativity with clear priorities and empowered trusted lieutenants to deliver. Expanding the digital hub. With the iPod and iTunes establishing Apple's foothold in music, Steve's vision extended further. He saw that people's digital lives were exploding with photos, videos, and documents, and that the Mac could be the hub for managing it all. This insight guided the development of new software like iPhoto, iMovie, and eventually GarageBand. Apple's ecosystem was no longer just computers and music players, it was becoming an integrated digital lifestyle brand. The road to the iPhone. Even as the iPod dominated the market, Steve was already thinking ahead. He believed the future lay in mobile devices that combined communication, media, and computing in one seamless experience. Behind the scenes, Apple was secretly developing a revolutionary product, a touch-screen phone that could run a full operating system. The groundwork laid by Next Step software, combined with lessons learned at Apple and Pixar, was now paying off. Steve Jobs was about to change the world again. Part 5, The iPhone Revolution, Reinventing the Phone and the World. As the 2000s progressed, Steve Jobs was no stranger to disruption. But even by his standards, what came next would be revolutionary not just for Apple, but for the entire world. The vision for the iPhone. Steve believed that the future wasn't just about computers or music players. The next big leap was in mobile communication. Phones had become ubiquitous but were frustrating: small keyboards, clunky interfaces, limited internet access. Steve imagined a device that combined a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator all in one sleek touchscreen package. The idea was audacious: to reinvent the phone from the ground up. The secret project. Apple kept the project tightly under wraps, codenamed Project Purple. Hundreds of engineers, designers, and software developers worked in secrecy for years. Jobs insisted on perfection, no compromises. He pushed his teams to create an entirely new user interface optimized for fingers, not still uses, or buttons. The software had to be powerful yet simple. Every detail from the glass screen to the tactile feedback was scrutinized. Overcoming challenges. Developing the iPhone wasn't easy. Apple had no experience building phones, so they partnered with hardware experts. Integrating cellular technology, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and the software ecosystem was a massive challenge. Jobs himself was involved in tough decisions from screen size to battery life. He famously said no to a physical keyboard, betting on the touchscreen. This was risky, many doubted it would work. The big reveal, January 2007. On January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs took the stage at the Macworld conference and delivered one of the most memorable product launches ever. With his trademark black turtleneck and jeans, he introduced 3 devices in one: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communicator. Then he dropped the bombshell: Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. The crowd erupted. The iPhone was not just a product, it was a paradigm shift. Immediate impact. When the iPhone launched later that year, it was unlike anything the market had seen. Its multi-touch interface, smooth scrolling, and elegant design wowed users and critics alike. The App Store came a year later, opening the platform for developers to create millions of apps fueling a new economy. Changing the rules. The iPhone redefined what a phone could be. It wasn't just a communication device, it was a powerful computer in your pocket. It changed how we interact with technology, access information, and connect with the world. Competitors scrambled to catch up, but Apple set the pace. Steve Jobs' leadership style at its peak. By this time, Steve's leadership was a mix of intensity and vision tempered by experience. He still demanded excellence and had a sharp tongue when things didn't meet his standards. But he had learned to listen more deeply, to trust his team, and to build a culture of innovation. He knew that Apple's success depended not just on him but on a strong team pushing boundaries together. The personal side, Steve Jobs' complex humanity. Behind the public persona was a man still deeply private, sometimes difficult, but driven by a desire to create lasting impact. His perfectionism sometimes caused friction, but his charisma inspired fierce loyalty. He faced health struggles in silence while continuing to lead Apple to new heights. A legacy in the making. The iPhone was the start of a new chapter for Apple and Steve Jobs. It laid the foundation for future innovations: the iPad, the Apple Watch, and the ecosystem that billions use today. More than products, Steve Jobs was reshaping culture, business, and technology itself. Part 6, The Final Acts, the iPad, Health Battles, and Legacy. The rise of the iPad, expanding the digital ecosystem. After the monumental success of the iPhone, Steve Jobs wasn't done innovating. He saw a new opportunity to change how people consumed media and interacted with technology. The result? The iPad, introduced in 2010. At first, skeptics called it just a big iPhone or a device without a clear purpose. But Steve knew the iPad would create an entirely new category: a device perfect for reading, browsing, gaming, and creativity. The iPad combined the portability of a phone with the screen size and power of a laptop, all wrapped in Apple's signature design and ease of use. It quickly became a hit, redefining computing once again and further cementing Apple's ecosystem of devices working seamlessly together. Facing health challenges. Behind the scenes, Steve Jobs was battling serious health issues. He was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer in 2003. For years, he kept his illness private, continuing to lead Apple with his characteristic intensity and vision. His health struggles were a stark contrast to his public image of unstoppable energy and control. He underwent treatments, took medical leaves, and even had a liver transplant in 2009. Despite these challenges, Steve remained deeply involved in Apple's product development and strategy. Leadership transition and final years. As his health declined, Steve began preparing Apple for life beyond him. He brought in strong leaders like Tim Cook, who had already been handling many operational roles. Steve officially resigned as CEO in August 2011, naming Tim Cook as his successor but remaining chairman of the board. Just 2 months later, on October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away. His death marked the end of an era but also the beginning of his enduring legacy. The legacy of Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs wasn't perfect. He was complex, brilliant but sometimes harsh, visionary but demanding. But his impact is undeniable. He changed multiple industries: personal computing, music, movies, phones, tablets, and digital publishing. He showed the world how design, technology, and storytelling could merge into products that didn't just work but inspired. His relentless pursuit of excellence pushed those around him to new heights. Apple today stands as one of the most valuable and influential companies in the world because of the foundation he built. Lessons from becoming Steve Jobs. This book reveals that Steve's greatness wasn't just in flashes of genius, but in his growth. He evolved from an impulsive young founder into a thoughtful, strategic leader. He learned to listen, to trust, and to empower others. He understood that innovation isn't just about ideas, it's about building teams and cultures that bring ideas to life. And perhaps most importantly, Steve Jobs' story teaches us about resilience, how setbacks and failures can lead to transformation. From being ousted at 30 to returning and leading Apple to unprecedented heights, his journey is one of relentless learning and becoming. Summing up the journey. Steve Jobs' life was anything but ordinary. From a rebellious kid with a passion for electronics, to a young visionary who changed personal computing, to a fall from grace, and then a remarkable comeback that reshaped the world, his story is powerful and inspiring. Becoming Steve Jobs isn't just about the products or the legendary presentations. It's about the man behind the myth, flawed, driven, and constantly evolving. Key lessons from Steve Jobs' life. Growth is a journey. Steve didn't become a great leader overnight. His early years were marked by impulsiveness and conflict. But he learned from failure, adapted, and grew. Success is often about who you become in the process, not just what you achieve. Vision needs execution. Having a bold vision isn't enough. Steve's later success came from combining his ideas with practical leadership, building strong teams, listening to others, and focusing relentlessly on quality. Design matters. Steve taught the world that technology should be beautiful and intuitive, not just functional. His obsession with design shaped Apple's culture and products, making them not only useful but deeply loved. Resilience in the face of setbacks. Getting fired from Apple could have ended Steve's career. Instead, it became a catalyst for growth. His journey shows how setbacks can lead to reinvention and new opportunities. Empowering others. Steve's evolution included learning to trust and empower creative people. Whether at Pixar or Apple, collaboration was key to turning vision into reality. Focus and simplicity. One of Steve's greatest leadership moves was simplifying Apple's product lines and focusing on what mattered most. This clarity helped Apple regain its edge and innovate. Leave a lasting impact. Steve wasn't just building products, he was shaping culture and changing how millions interact with technology. His legacy is about creating work that lasts beyond a lifetime. Final thoughts for you. Steve Jobs' life encourages us to think differently, not just about technology, but about ourselves. We all face challenges, doubts, and moments of failure. What matters is how we respond. Becoming someone greater isn't about sudden transformation. It's about persistent growth, learning from mistakes, and staying true to your vision while adapting to the world around you. Whether you're an entrepreneur, creator, or simply someone chasing a dream, Steve's story offers lessons in passion, resilience, and leadership. Thank you for joining me on this journey through becoming Steve Jobs. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to get notified about more book summaries and insights here at Books Arena. What's a book or story you want me to summarize next? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep becoming the best version of yourself.